In this lesson, we're going to learn how to place our static meshes. Alright, so we've learned how to export our static meshes from a 3D software package like 3ds Max or Maya Softimage, and we've also learned how to import them into our content browser. Now what we want to do is we want to take them from the content browser and bring those into our level editor. Now the reason that we want to replace the BSP geometry, okay, we spent a lot of time creating that, and you might be thinking, well, the room is built, why do we need to replace that? Well, BSP geometry is very expensive, especially if you have a very large level. And trying to create that large level with BSP geometry just really won't work all that well. And so using static meshes will give you the exact look that you want. We can only do so much with adding and subtracting these BSP brushes. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with adding in those static meshes. So to do so, let's go to our content browser, and we're going to go to the folder that we want for our static meshes. And you can see that I brought a couple more in. I brought in the door frame and the door itself, and so those will be available. Alright, so let's go ahead and bring in our static mesh wall double windows. So I'm going to drag that over onto our level editor tab, and then drop that right here in our scene. And you can really place it anywhere, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm just going to type in my transform information, and on my X direction I'm going to type in 0 because it's going to be centered up on this wall here. And I'm going to drag that up into the Y. Okay, so I'm just going to drag that up there. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to replace this entire portion right here. So let's go ahead and bring that over. Let's do, I believe, we're going to go into a negative direction. We're going to go up to, I believe, 480. Okay, that looks good right there, negative 480. That's going to put that right up against that wall. Yeah, and that looks good. Okay. And then if we drag this up in the Y, we want this to be right on top of our floor. And so now we need to think about what is going to be best for us and what we're doing here. So I'm going to go ahead and set this at, let's say, 10. Okay, because I have a floor static mesh that I'm going to bring in. You can see that that's sitting right on top there. All right. So now with that, we want to create the other two. So simply just hold down Alt and move this in the X direction. Now, before I do that, let's actually change our grid snapping. I'm going to change that up to something around 10, make that a little larger. That's just going to make it a little easier to place. So I'm going to pull that out, and then I'm going to hit the E key, go to my rotation tool. And I'm going to rotate that until we get to 45 degrees, and then grab my move tool. Let's switch it over to the local coordinate system, so that way we can just move it in the X right down the side of that wall. Okay, so just like that. Let's go ahead and go to our top view, and let's make sure that we have lined this up properly. And you can see here that that wall is working out pretty well for the most part. Let's go ahead and pull that over, and you'll see that that bumps up right up against that. We are going to have a little bit of a difference, okay, on the walls themselves. They're not matching up exactly right. I'm actually going to take this static mesh, and I'm going to push that back even further. So let's go to right about there. And actually, let's see. Let's take our grid snapping. Let's set that down to 1. I want that wall, the back side of that wall, to be up against that blue additive brush. Okay, because these walls are going to be a little bit different. Same thing here. Let's take a look. Make sure that we're on that. We don't have to be absolutely exact. That's just not going to happen. But we want to be fairly close. And I want to be on the center of that wall, so I'm going to push that back in the X a little bit. Okay, and that should get us fairly close. Okay. All right, good. Let's take a look at the other side here. Now we're going to have a pillar that's covering up that there, so we really don't have to worry about that too much. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and create one more. Let's hold down Alt. We're going to drag that over. And then I'm going to hit E to go to my rotation tool. Let's rotate that 45 degrees. Let's grab our move tool and put that into position here. So I'm just going to move that until the back side is up against that blue brush. And again, it may not be exact, but you want to get pretty close. And then I'm going to pull that forward. Got a little bit of overlap there. Okay. And let's actually pull this one forward a little bit more. I'll push that forward in the X to right about there. Okay. All right, so now we've got our window walls in. Let's go ahead and bring in our outer walls. And these static meshes are actually right here inside of the content browser already. So you can find those under the architecture folder, and we have wall 400 by 400. Let's go ahead and drag and drop that into the level editor, and we'll place that, and we're going to rotate it 90 degrees. Now you also have the option of just typing it in right here, where you can just type in 90 and hit enter, and that will be placed there. Now with your, if you hit the W key, okay, that's going to take you to your move tool, and let's go ahead and just push that into position. I'm going to go to my top view, and I just want to line this up. Okay, let's turn off that local coordinate system so that way we can move that along the X and the Y. And I'm just going to push it right up against this wall, but I actually want it right in the middle of the grid right here. Okay, so that looks good. And I'm going to put it right up against the back of that. Actually, you know what? I want it right here because I want it to intersect with that wall a little bit. So that way it appears. Let's push it back. Because we're going to have that covered up by that pillar. And so I'll just give it a little bit of a space here. Kind of like that. And it's still up against that back part. Alright, so that looks fine. Alright, so let's take our next wall. Let's turn our grid snap up a little bit higher. Let's go up to, let's do 10 just to make sure that we get that. So let's hold down Alt, let's drag that down. And you'll see that snapped right up against that second wall. And then we need one more, hold down Alt, drag that down. And that should snap right up against the end of that wall. Perfect. Okay, so now let's take all three of those, and we can hold down Control and select those. And let's hold Alt, drag that, then hold Shift so that way we can move our camera along with it as we're dragging that across. And I just want to make sure that that back side of that wall is up against that blue line of our additive brush. And that looks great. Alright. So now what we want to do is go ahead and go into our perspective view and just kind of take a look at what we have. And you can see that we brought in our windows and we brought in these static meshes for our walls. Now these walls are white because they have a default material that has been applied to them. That's perfectly fine. We'll go ahead and we'll leave it just the way it is. Now in the next lesson we're going to continue building up the level with our static meshes, and we'll start working on that back wall and then the floor and the ceiling. So we'll get started with that next.